Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Today I am speaking with Eric. You can find him on Twitter at Eric Electrons. And Eric is a physics student. And also, I've seen him on Benjamin Boyce's podcast talking about race and identity and the whole current culture around it. So I wanted to have him on, talk a couple of things about that because this is something that's been bugging me for a bit. Anyways, Eric, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so like as I mentioned, I saw you speaking with Benjamin Boyce. But if you want to give people a little bit of your background and like you're pretty vocal on Twitter, and like I said, I've seen you a couple other places. If you want to let people know like why you got started into this, and like where you're coming from on that.
Yeah, so I'm a third year physics student at Georgia State University. Um, you know, did a little bit of black hole research, and I'm a double major actually, physics and mathematics. But I'm more likely going to drop the mathematics so I could finish sooner. But yeah, I became vocal on Twitter about maybe 5 years ago or so. Just seeing the different social justice stuff and the things happening inside academia that really inspired me to speak up more. And that's how I landed a chance to go on Benjamin Boyce's podcast and talk about the issues there. And I'm really passionate about obviously truth and getting closest to it, the approximation of truth, which is what science is all about. And you know, giving people an insider's look of how scientists think and what can we improve in our society in terms of scientific literacy.
Like that's kind of similar to where I'm from in the sense that uh, I only started looking at this stuff around 2014 because I was away for a while, and I came back. It's what hit me the most was Islam.
Mm.
Like I'm from Muslim background, and you know, seeing people being called white supremacists, people like Ayan Arsi Ali and Majid Nawaz being called white supremacists for speaking out against Islam. I'm like, there was something wrong there. It just didn't make sense. And so I'm like, okay, well, why is this happening? And I just started looking for why, like, was the conversation around Islam so screwed up? And then the more you start looking, like, I mean, the whole racial conversation, and then that started getting more and more once Trump got elected. But so I started looking into this. Like I came back in about 2014, so I saw the 2 year build up to Trump, and then now I've seen like the 4 years following Trump, and it's just things are getting worse and worse. And so when you said, okay, you want to find an objective truth, you're coming from science. Like that's that's a whole issue with free speech. That's the scientific method. It's I say H2O, two parts hydrogen, one part oxygen makes water. You say no, it makes whiskey. And whatever. Like obviously, this is something very stupid, but we're you try it out. Like, can you make whiskey with two parts hydrogen, one part water? Sorry, two parts hydrogen, one part oxygen. Can you make whiskey? And you can try and try and try and try and try. And now it doesn't happen. You can pretty say, okay, it doesn't. Like that's a scientific method. Like, and I bring this up because right now with COVID, it's follow the science, follow the science, follow the science. And at the same time, you're getting the New England Journal of Medicine telling you that racism is a worse virus than COVID. Now, I don't think you should say follow the science. I think like you and Melissa Chen were talking about this the other day, like on Twitter. It's like I think it's follow the evidence that the methodology of science gives you. I think that would be a better way to put it. But if you want to talk about that, like talk about objective truth coming through science and like go about that. Like where are we at with that right now?
Yeah, when it comes to this COVID situation, that really, to me, should have been kind of a red flag in terms of the scientific community. But I'm getting the sentiment now that a lot of scientists and science communicators, they don't understand that the way they're communicating things are actually hurting their efforts, no matter if their conclusions are right or not. And yeah, on getting closest to the truth, I mean, I'm all about, I think science is about getting closest to the most accurate approximation, because science isn't about proving
Yeah.
things. It's getting as close as you can to that accurate, to the truth that you can, you know what I mean? And like you said, it's through testing, it's through experimentation, and you do that, and you can do that on a very basic level. And then of course there are certain ways where it goes further than that, than just, observing, looking at an experiment, doing the experiment, tweaking certain things, trying things over and over, and then coming to a conclusion. There's a lot more to it, but that's the gist of it, and that's how we could apply it in different ways. I think where it goes wrong is when you see scientists, for instance, saying everyone should stay home, everyone should not be outside at all, and then all of a sudden, when it comes to BLM protests, Black Lives Matter, for those who don't know what BLM is, um, all of a sudden it's okay to be outside, and this is the most important thing in our lives, and we should have strikes for science, and all this other stuff. Like, that's showing a clear political bias. Now, when it comes to science, every scientist has bias, and then bias can creep into research. However, when it comes to applying the scientific method correctly, bias is not relevant anymore, because what matters is that experiment. Just like how you said, when you experiment to see if certain molecules can make whiskey or water, you do that experiment, and you could do that over and over, and you'll get a certain result. In the same way, um, I think scientists and science communicators need to do that when it comes to communicating science to the public. If you're going to be for everyone staying home and staying on lockdown and everything, no matter if I disagree with you or not, or people disagree with you or not, like, you need to be consistent at that. But the problem is when politics gets in the way, they poison the well a bit when it comes to getting to the most accurate approximation of what the truth is. And that's been a big problem for years, at least 5 to 6 years, as I've seen in the science community.
Okay, I mean, I just want to stick with this, like you know, we want to get an approximation of truth, like you know, gravity is 9.8 meters per second at sea level, right? So like that's an approximation of objective reality that we all agree on. Yes, it's going to be slightly faster if you're on top of Everest, and it's going to be I don't know, I'm going to get this all wrong, but it's going to be slightly lower or something like that when you get, or sorry, I get it all wrong. Like, there's going to be more pressure the closer you get to the center of the Earth, and so it's going to be the stronger pull, right? So the further away you get, it's going to be later. It's an objective reality that we've agreed on. When I see the New England Journal of Medicine telling me that it's a worse virus than, racism is worse virus than COVID, and again, I'm diabetic. I have one kidney. I've got a low immune system. I mask up. I do whatever I can to take care of myself because I think that's the best thing for myself to do. Like that's on me. Like, I'm not going to push this on anyone, but I'm looking at like infection rates. I'm looking at how susceptible I am. I'm looking at, okay, I've got a low immune system. Looking at all these things, and whatever I can do, even if it's someone's going to say, okay, a mask is stupid, you're just not doing anything for you, blah blah blah. I'm like, okay, that's on me now, right? But if they had said, because they'd gone up to that point saying, okay, wear a mask, do this, stay inside. Now, if they want to prove you going out, they could say, okay, as an adult, if you're going out or if you have young children, you are responsible for them. Here are the threats. We suggest you wear a mask, try to socially distance, and bring hand sanitizer with you. But we understand why you're protesting. Maybe you might have had less people protest, and that might have led to less rioting. I don't know. But at that point, you're treating people like adults, and they are like to me, it's the damage that's like something like that is doing to the scientific community. That's the damage that's doing to expertise, the damage that's doing to it's the academy, some scientific institutions, journalism. They're basically shooting themselves in the foot, and they're shooting expertise in the foot, and that's my big worry with this. It's not like this one specific message, which is bad enough on its own, but it's like, if we lose trust in science, where do we go from there?
Exactly. And I'm really trying to figure a way to get it to scientists, because the problem with scientists, they think people are either naive or stupid, and willfully at that, and they don't trust adults to do adult things. Like they think that they have this weird confidence in government telling people what to do. And that never really goes over too well. And I think a lot of that is due to them not um, properly understanding certain things in
Mm.
history, or not studying, political science or maybe economics. It's due to a lot of things, but scientists generally have a very just a pessimistic type of view of most people. And once they get out of that sort of mindset, and they trust people more to do what's best for themselves, their family, we could get to the closest approximation of the truth with just saying the science. And sometimes just saying the science is enough. I think too many times during this whole COVID debate, what we've seen is scientists and authorities, they say one thing scientifically, and then they mix their politics in that, and they mesh it together in a way where it's like, well, this is the science, and it's like, no, this is your opinion on top of the science. And we need to be able to separate that. And I don't have a lot of trust and faith in scientists doing that anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, again, that's scary. I want to go back to something you'd mentioned, the science strike.
Mm,
Now, this to me, like, this is the whole part of the, like, where you get racism is worse than COVID and all that. Okay, we need a science strike because of lack of equity in science. Now, I don't know the statistics. I haven't looked at them. What percentage of science degrees are black, brown, white? Like, I don't know. Like, that's where I mean that I think the two are connected when you have a conversation like that, and that's what's taking over science, and that's what's taking over science journalism. So obviously, stories like that are going to come out. So that attitude that you need a perfect balance in STEM departments to show what's going out in the population. So if the population is 13% black, then there should be 13% black, in that school in the STEM fields. And now, if this is coming from scientists and science departments, like, don't they understand? Like, I took statistics 25 years ago, and I kind of understand distribution. And like, shouldn't scientists?
you would think so, but the thing is, I think when people learn something to the highest degree and their political bias
Mhm.
gets in the way, they know how to manipulate it either consciously or unconsciously in a way that will fit their narrative or their
Mhm.
ideas. And that's done often. I mean, it was done during this whole 2 + 2 = 5
Oh God.
thing on Twitter. I mean, that's another subject. But kind of going back to what you said on racism being like the worst disease, like that to me is like, first of all, no, it's not. Second of all, racism today is really not much of a obstacle as it used to be. And what's crazy is even those during the times where it was an obstacle, I'm talking about the times of Frederick
Mhm.
Douglass, Booker T. Washington in the early 1900s or late 1800s, early 1900s, they even had a more conservative mindset of, I think we should take personal accountability and do what we can to our best abilities, and not, you know, put all of our mind towards, oh, how oppressed we are and stuff like that. And what I've seen from the strike for science thing is this sort of racist assumption that, in order for Black people to get into science, in order for Black people to achieve the same or similar success as their white and Asian counterparts, that they must, that there needs to be like these safe spaces for them, and people need to be deprogrammed to not be racist because, you know, for some reason they think that the the population or the low population of Black people in STEM fields are due to racism mainly. And that's just simply not true. I mean, one thing I could point to, for instance, is the fact that Black women are the largest growing number of college graduates out of any group. A lot of people don't know that, but Black women are, like, per capita, they have the largest group of people graduating college. I could, so I can't source that off the top of my head,
Mhm.
but I'm sure if anyone
Yeah.
looks that up, that they could find it pretty easily. And you know the majors that they're picking matters, because, like, why would this college system that's allowing all these Black women to succeed not allow them to get into STEM fields? That doesn't even make any sense. It's they're choosing certain fields that fit their personal lifestyle or their needs in some way, shape, or form, and they're not choosing STEM fields. Now, if the conversation was more so like, how do we get more people into STEM that aren't really interested in STEM right now, I'll be for that. But this weird conversation of, we need a certain amount of Black people in STEM, we need a certain amount of Hispanic people in STEM, or just unrepresented people in STEM in general, is bananas to me. It's sort of like looking at your favorite sport and seeing a certain amount of, I don't know, whatever in there. Like, let's say the NBA, it has mostly Black people in there. It's like if I were to look at the NBA and say, we need to make programs so that more Asians could get into the NBA, because the population of Asian players in the NBA doesn't represent, um, the population of the United States or of Europe or
Yeah.
wherever this is. So it just doesn't make sense. And I have the controversial opinion of I oftentimes ask, like, why does there need to be more Black people in anything? Like, I'm for more people who want to be in things, but I'm not for having Black people in something just for representation. I'm naturally, in a free society, there's going to be disparities, and there are going to be a lack of insert identity here,
Yeah.
in various places. But I just don't see, I never saw the need of, there should be Black people in a specific space just because.
Okay, sticking with this for a bit now. The whole thing came out with Harvard and Asian students, and they're like, okay, they deduct so many points in SATs, they give so many points to Black students. Now, it's spoken to a couple of college professors and stuff, and so if a Black student gets, I don't know what it is, like I think it's 100. It could be wrong, but they get a 100-point bump. Right? Now you got a kid who's gone through high school, middle school and high school, and you see a market improvement, and but he's just not quite ready for Harvard Medical School. But you bump him up 100 points, you get him in there or get her in there. And they don't do that well. They get discouraged and then they switch programs. Invariably, they end up going into some arts program, and some of them are going to end up into like intersectionality course in sociology or something like that. And it's like, oh, well, of course I didn't succeed. It's because the system was designed to make me not succeed. If like my whole thing with that was, if you see that person with that promise, why set them up to fail? Because you are setting them up to fail. Why not do like a prep here, saying, you know what, you're really good, we'll hold a place for you, go to a community college, take these courses, get a B average, and you got a place waiting for you for the following year. Something along those lines. Like, obviously I don't make policy, I don't, I'm probably missing a lot of things, but something along those lines to me would seem of more service and of more use. And it doesn't have to be a Black student. Like, to any student who shows promise that you think might do well, why not give them the tools to actually succeed? Because I mean, you're taking physics. I did sciences for a while, and I mean, I did fairly well. I just got pissed off at my teachers. Um, uh, but
That
that's a whole
happens.
other thing. Well, it's just a whole other thing. Like, I went into art, like I went into poli sci afterwards, but learning physics is hard. Like, I did the basics. I did, just like motion and optics and a bit of, you know, elementary, well, not even like, like protons and electrons, like bit of particle stuff, but not much. Basically just around light. So there's a lot of stuff there. And if you aren't prepared, and if you haven't done that, like, you're not going to be able to understand quantum physics if you don't get motion, if you don't understand how light works. So I don't understand that thinking of, well, just get them in because we want the representation. Like, aren't you damaging your university? Aren't you damaging your program? And aren't you hurting those students?
Yeah, and you're talking about best case scenario, that switch into programs. Worst case scenario is they drop out completely, which is what happens to a lot of people. They drop out of these Ivy League universities, and then they um, take on like jobs where, or they take on jobs where they're making less, or they're doing things that leads them to a bad road ahead of them, and then this cycle repeats itself. And then of course they could blame racism or not having the resources and whatnot. But like, let's say for instance me, like I went to two community colleges before I got to Georgia State University. So I went to a community college, and it was mostly because like I was self-aware enough to know that I wasn't ready for Georgia Tech or Harvard or these other places. Like I just wasn't. I took a break after high school to work, and then I came much later to college, and I worked my way up. I barely, like, my high school experience wasn't too good, by the way. Like I barely passed high school, and I and through that, like that made me dislike schooling at all. Like I've always been a self learner anyway, but I just disliked school after my high school experience, and my high school was one of the worst in Northern California. So through that, for me, if I look at that and I'm saying, like, if I did have good grades, even if I did in the one of the worst high schools in Northern California, if I would have went to a UC Berkeley or something like that, I would have most likely flunked out or went to a lesser major where, it's not as challenging in the areas that would challenge me. And I wouldn't be where I'm at now. So I think you're 100% on when you say, like, they're setting them up for failure by making these programs to where they're streamlined straight into these Ivy League schools, where they're the little fish in a big pond. And now, although they have all these resources and all these diversity offices and all this other stuff, they're just not ready. And it doesn't mean that they're dumb or that they're not ready because of their race. It just simply means that due to multiple factors, be it their school, like where they were, because not all schools, are equal, but due to their schools, due to just where they're at academically, they're not ready for that high tier type of environment where they'll drown. So, naturally that they'll either flunk out or move into another program. And that's what often happens.
Again, sticking with this, it's just because I'm seeing a lot of it, and I was seeing a lot of it this past year. And there was a meeting in Toronto, or whatever. It was a conference like this. It was an online conference, and it was by one of them was a journalist at a major newspaper in Canada, and then it was two South Asians and one Middle Eastern person, and they were talking about brown complicity in white supremacy. You can't deny that South Asians do well in science and math, and like you got a lot of Indian and Pakistani doctors, and what their whole premise was that white people will hire brown people to say they're not racist. Brown people are then taking jobs from black people. So we shouldn't take those jobs and give them to black people. And so to fight the white supremacist system of white people only hiring brown people because they want to show they're not racist. Now, I mean, that's demeaning to me. Like, what, I only got my job because of this. It's demeaning to black people. But there's another part of this that says, objectivity is a white trait. The love of the written word is a white trait. Science is a white way of knowing. This is coming from people who call themselves anti-racist. This is where it really gets me. Like, how the hell can you say you're anti-racist? You said you're doing physics and math. That's Arabic numerals that came from India, for Christ's sakes. And these people are saying you're doing a white way of knowing. My whole thing with the affirmative action and all that, is like, and things like this is, if there's an actual racist person at your school, which I'm sure there are, I'm not saying, he only got in because he's black. He doesn't deserve to be there. And it, like, to me, that reinforces all of that. And they're saying basically the same thing. And it's just like, that's what gets me. It's like, this part of the anti-racism stuff is like, you're turning everything on its head, and you're pushing the cause of white supremacists. I'm sure the KKK loves talk like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure you see the the fact that they're starting from a conclusion and then they're working their way backwards, which
Mhm.
is the opposite of the scientific method. You know, I mean, of course, you're supposed to form a hypothesis, but you're not supposed to have a conclusion ready and then
Mhm.
find evidence to support that. And when they do the whole thing of, oh, brown people are hired for this position just to, meet diversity quota type thing, and then all this other stuff, they're starting from the conclusion that the system is racist. So how can we justify the fact that there are a lot of Southeast Asians or something like that in specific fields, or anyone, some fields have a lot of Hispanics in there. Some fields have, uh, other people who are non-white. So I just, what I want people to realize is that they're starting from the conclusion of, the system is rigged, it's systemically racist, and they work their way backwards to pick apart um, excuses that aren't really evidence based. They're more like they'll see an outcome they dislike and attribute that to their conclusion of, racism, and that's a horrible way of doing science. And that's the reason why a lot of people kind of side eye a lot of things that come out from the sociology department. It's not to say sociology isn't legitimate, it's very legitimate, I think. And I think that it could do a lot of good, but I think they have a very bad replication problem, and then they also have, their peer review system is really messed up. And I think the SoCal Square
Yeah.
incident really exposed that, and they didn't like that at all. So that's the reason why they're calling everyone a white supremacist who disagree with them, even if they're black or not white.
Yeah. Okay. Like the white supremacist thing, or it's a right wing talking point. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's another thing I've noticed. So like I was in war zones up from about 2002 to 2014. Um, but I'd see it before and I'd see a little bit after. Like if someone spoke out about Islam, oh, you're right wing. It's a right wing talking point. During during George W. years, patriotism became racist. It became a right wing thing. Like Joe Rogan's right wing because he's got an American flag behind him. Like that kind of crap. And there's just what I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal put out an article about how the only good criticism, or the only criticism coming of critical race theory, is from the right. It's like, well, Helen Pluckrose and James Lindsay just wrote that book, and I mean, look at Eric or Brett Weinstein, and you know, I learned about this from people from the left. I didn't learn about it from people from the right. Now I see the same kind of thing happening. Like anyone who said anything about Islam, oh, you're either right wing or you're using right wing talking points.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and especially since Trump did his little executive order, everyone's like, oh no, it's right wing, right wing, right wing, right wing. And then I see the same thing with like ex-Muslims that spoke out. The the insults, especially the women, the insults that they got. Like Majid Nawaz was called a house Muslim. He was called Uncle Tom. He was called a porch monkey, native informant. Female friends of mine who are ex-Muslims, like, you're just doing this for white dick, and shit like that. Now I see the same thing with black people who are speaking out against critical race theory or some of the excesses on the left. Now, Candace Owens, I'm not a big fan of hers. I think she's quite, harmful to the conversation. But I don't want to see her getting rape threats. It's disgusting. Like, you don't need that. Like, I see so many similarities. Like, I don't know if you notice the stuff around Islam, but are you seeing like as soon as you speak out, are you all automatically labeled right wing? Like how does that work with you?
Well, I was very close to the atheist movement. Um, I grew up Christian,
Mm-hmm.
but then I became more of like a deist like later in high school, and um, I followed the atheist movement ever since like 2009 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And although now I consider myself agnostic, I I saw a lot of that rhetoric and you know trying to combat a lot of the things that the atheist movement was saying, and it was more so towards Sam Harris at the time, because Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, and Richard Dawkins, they would speak out a lot about a lot against Islamic extremism and um, things found in the Quran, for instance, or things of that nature. And I found their arguments to be interesting, but I also saw the social justice ties of when people would call them racist and all this other stuff. And at the time, I was just like, I don't get, this thing. Like why can't we agree based on something without considering someone, you know, other or a traitor or something or evil. That's the main thing. Like what's worse than being wrong is you being evil, and that's the easy way of getting out of answering arguments and things of that nature. But that was the first time me seeing it. And then um it's funny, I just tweeted about this. It was like during the whole atheist movement there was this thing called elevator gate, and um that was around the time feminism started corrupting the atheist movement and
Talking like
co-opting it.
Atheism Plus.
Yeah, atheism
Okay.
plus and all that stuff. Yeah, they really co-opted it and well hijacked it, I would say. And it became a thing of, oh, if you don't agree with us then you're sexist and racist and there's no retribution for you at all. And I just wasn't for that at all. And I was really surprised at how many people claimed to value critical thinking and all the other stuff just gladly accepted that, but at the same time they would get mad that people call them racist for criticizing Islam. So that whole thing threw me for a loop, and it led me down this rabbit hole of just looking at all these arguments in history about this, about people agreeing and disagreeing on very basic things, but yet being called Uncle Tom or whatever that they call people. And I mean, I think calling someone an Uncle Tom is the most ridiculous thing for obvious reasons, because, if you read the book, Uncle Tom was a hero. But yeah, and one thing I do like about Candace Owens is she exposes that part. Like she's really good at understanding a lot of the arguments that people do against her, and the reason why people insult her, because she comes from that. Where I disagree with her is her tactics of kind of taking everything that she used to do on the left and doing it on the right.
Mm.
The identity politics stuff, and I don't necessarily agree with that part, but at the same time, I think we could learn from everyone, and I think everyone has a point somewhere along the line. So yeah, it's a very strange thing when people assume a person to be racist or a traitor to their own race simply for disagreeing. Like to know the intent of a person just because you disagree with them, or to think the intent of a person just because you disagree with them without any further evidence other than they disagree with you, is just stupid to me.
When I was 14, I was taking the bus in Montreal, and on the seat back in front of me, someone wrote "White Power, Black Caca." Okay? The only word they spelled correctly was caca. Now, I laughed my head off, and since that point, like racism like that, someone calling me a packy or whatever, didn't really bother me. I'm like, okay. I kept thinking back to that. I'm like, you can't spell basic words like that. That's you now. But over the last 20, 25 years, I've been facing racism, and it's people call it soft bigotry of low expectations. No, it's hard bigotry. It's low expectations. Yeah, there's nothing soft about it. I'm sorry. Like I'm being treated as lesser. Like I need a leg up because of the color of my skin, because otherwise I can't do it on my own.
Likewise.
And it's and especially like since coming back in 2014, it's worse and worse. Like calling Majid Nawaz a house Muslim and saying you're a racist house Muslim. It's like, first of all, look at where the term house Muslim comes from. Like, go back, like where did that term what did that term originally say, and what was it talking about? And now you're applying it to a guy who wants to reform his faith, and you're calling him a house Muslim. Like, and you're saying he's racist. Like that whole thing. Like, but what's her face? Just the other day now, Chelsea Handler.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I had to remind 50 Cent that he was black. Like, excuse me? I think he knows. I think he sees it when he looks in the mirror.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the mindset, believe it or not, of a lot of these people in academia. Like they think, oh, the Black people or non-white people who disagree with me on social justice issues, they disagree with me because they just forgot who they are, one, or two, they just are so gullible that they got caught up in right-wing talking points. That's the only thing. Like, it couldn't be because they could possibly be wrong about everything that they know about social justice and all this other stuff. But those are the only two things, and then maybe a couple other things. But the fact that they assume that it's due to your character and not due to what you may or may not know, that to me, like you said, it's hard bigotry. It's not, there's nothing soft about it. It's clearly racist. It's clearly and I, like you, I've faced more racism, I would say, from those type of people than I have from right-wing people any day. And I talk to a good amount of both. And I've even talked to people actually on the far right. And I've still, to this day, I've never got as much racism as I got from people from what some would say the far left. But I would just say, a lot of left-leaning people in general, or they consider themselves left-leaning, but they're probably more so far left.
Yeah, the left right thing. It doesn't mean anything anymore. I mean, is there
Yeah.
much difference between Antifa and the Bugaloo Boys? Like, really? You know, no. I mean, Antifa's got more money for bail, and Bugaloo Boys have better Kevlar. Like, it's the but it's about it. Like
Yeah,
When Eamon
sure.
Bundy teams up with BLM because BLM is anti-police. Like, you might want to look at, like, the horseshoe is no longer a horseshoe; it's a circle.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty crazy, and it's weird that they can't see that. I mean, it's weird that they can't even see the ties to regular critical race theory, which has ties to Marxism and then things of that nature in their ideology, or the fact that the BLM people, or the BLM founders, like, one of them saying that they're trained Marxists and they
Right.
value that, and they've taken pictures with and outwardly said things such as, oh, we think white people are less than human and all this other crazy stuff. you know uh, I don't understand how people can't look at that and see that there's a deeper issue there.
Okay, I brought up the BLM and the Antifa and stuff. Now,
Yeah.
there was that report, because I was talking about someone about this yesterday. We're talking about extremism. That report that just came out of Minnesota, um, it was Bugaloo Boys. It burnt down that first police precinct in Minneapolis, and, like, after people were like, "Aha, it's right wing, it's right wing, it's right wing." Okay, and I'm not disputing that. Like, I'm not arguing like these people. But then a bunch of videos come out, and it's these guys. They're like, "Oh, well, we heard, some protesters were being pushed back by the police, and these people were out protesting George Floyd. We're gonna go help out the protesters against the police." And these are these guys. So there's that crossover. Like, you've got this. So you've got Antifa and BLM, and you've got the Bugaloo Boys and the Proud Boys and whatever all the other idiots are on that side. But they're coming out of your education system. So if you've had an education system that is, one, telling you that the United States is the worst place in the world. I know 1619 hasn't got into the history curriculum, but there is that post-colonial thing that I've been looking at it. Critical race theory and intersectionality has been in high school since roughly about 2010,
Mm.
like in the curriculum and stuff like that. And you're surprised that you're getting more extremism, and you're scratching your head going, well, why is there more white supremacy? Well, in a country that's 65% white, when you get kids to focus on race and racial identity, you might get white supremacy rising. Maybe,
Exactly.
just maybe.
Just maybe, yeah. I mean, there might be a slight possibility of that. Yeah, I mean, again, and the people in academia who are so oblivious to this, it really blows my mind, because I'm just like, don't you understand that there is a actual slippery slope here? Like, these ideologies lead to this. It's not like these ideologies accidentally make this, and these are like some unforeseen consequences. No, these are foreseen consequences. We know this. We could look back in the early 2000s. We could look back after the 80s when some of this was implemented in law, for instance. Um, it has bad consequences. We've seen this over and over and over. And when it comes to the the whole, just the social justice thing in general. I mean, that's been here since Godwin or something. What is that, like 250 years? And in political theory, So I mean, again, I just think they look at it from the surface, and what it aims to do, and a lot of very smart people, they judge it based off that, instead of seeing what it does in practice, um, and judging it based off that. And I think once people start seeing it more in practice, and honestly, when people are calling everything racist, everything sexist, everything homophobic or transphobic, I think that's radicalizing a lot of people, or turning people away, at least, um, against their ideals. And that's the reason why I speak out so much, or I expose it. It's a very good remedy for a lot of this madness that we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I keep bringing up this study, and he published some of it right after like the killing of George Floyd and the protests and the riots started. But then later, earlier, like I think maybe about a month or so ago, or maybe 2 months, it came out in Tablet Mag, and it was a study of newspapers using race, racist, systemic oppression, like those kind of terms, and the frequency of from 2000 to 2008. It was kind of steady, but there was a slow rise. From 2008 to 2012, it doubled, and then from 2012 to 2016, it tripled, and it just kept going up and up and up. And you kept getting articles about how jogging is racist because it started in Portland. The one that I think was the worst, and I keep bringing it up because it was just so goddamn bad. There was four black girls, high school girls in Brook. They were not so four high school girls. They were black, two South Asian males, and they're from on a high school trip from New Jersey into Brooklyn. The two boys beat up the girls, and I think one of them pissed on the girls. The op-ed piece in the New York Times, like the leading piece on their op-ed page was, it was due to whiteness. Now, okay, that shouldn't turn someone over the edge, but if you consistently get shit like that, that you're told you're racist, you're told you've got privilege. I keep bringing up the thing with the coal miners. During the Obama years, coal miners running out of, losing their jobs, being told they got privilege, and at the same time being told to learn to code. Again, you're gonna piss some people off. Some guy starting high school, some guy starting college, he takes a diversity course, and he's told his privilege, and he's seen his town, his parents lose their livelihood or whatever. You don't think there's going to be some reaction? Like I don't get that. Like I don't get that whole thing of people scratching their heads, going, "Why is white supremacy on the rise?"
Yeah, I again, I think it's people having their own little bubbles, and they're not going out to get the perspectives that they need from all sides of this issue. They're just staying in their bubbles where everyone's calling other people things, and then assuming that to be true. I mean, I have a lot of academic friends, and they come to me in my messages, and often they say, "Hey, like, I agree with you. I've been peeping this for a while, but I can't say anything due to my position, or I can't say anything because I'm in the middle of doing this research with a lot of these people who disagree with you on certain things, but I just want you to know I do support you and I'm here." Like, I get those messages at least once a week. And, you know, I think when that type of environment is around, it doesn't encourage people to, again, stick to their scientific training and get closest to the objective possible truth that there is, like the most objective possible truth there is. Instead, it just makes people comfortable enough to sit back and blame whiteness due to what has happened in the past, and then to act like things haven't changed at all. That's another ridiculous thing that I hear often, that things haven't changed. I mean, I've been told by white people and STEM and all these other people that nothing has changed from the past, and it's still the same amount of racism. And some people even argue with me even more today than there was in the past. And I'm like, come on now, like, that's ridiculous. I think once we curate environments to where free speech is actually valued, and being for censorship is more taboo. I think we're just going to keep seeing this, and that's the reason why lately, especially, I've been more put off by academia, and more than likely, I'm probably not going to go to grad school because I don't see this environment as being one I want to be in.
I've spoken with Bo Weingard and Colin Wright. Both of them left academia. Okay, I have no way of judging this. Colin is a biologist, but from everything, it seems like he was respected until he stepped out of line and on the transition. Bo is evolutionary psychology, brought up the IQ issue, and that was it. Third rail, he's gone. I mean, I've heard you speak. We're talking right now. You seem like a fairly intelligent person. Now, isn't that a loss to physics and whatever grad school you go to? Maybe to yourself, like you might end up doing something. You might end up doing something that you really love or whatever, but you might not. You might end up doing something that you don't like because you got out of this. I'm not trying to scare you or anything like that. I'm just saying
Yeah.
like that's a potential loss. And I see them driving away. It's like they want to drive away talent. Like Jordan McWhorter was doing that about a month or so ago. He just asked people to write in if they were scared to talk out. I think he said in the first weekend he got 140 some odd messages from academics. How long before those professors leave? And then you have less good people in schools. Okay, I don't have kids. I'm doing this purely selfish. I want to make sure that the doctors that look after me while I'm an old fart know what the hell they're doing. I want to make sure the people who are writing the policies are not going to leave me out in the cold when I'm retired. Like I want to make sure all that's taken care of. So I want this stuff. I want this system to work, and we should all want this system to work. When I hear you say you might not go into grad school, and I don't want to sway you or whatever, people make their own decisions, but like to me, it's like, okay, we're losing something. Doesn't the academy see that, or do they consider you an undesirable that they would rather see go anyway?
I think it's more so the latter than the former. I mean, unfortunately, they see you as other if you don't agree with them ideologically a lot of times. And this isn't, it's not very apparent at first. Like it's like first, well, I'm going to say it's probably different when it comes to different people of different races. But what I noticed with me is they're very open and welcoming to me, obviously, because they have in their mind that I'm so oppressed and that I need like all this extra help and stuff. And then I see that. And then once they learn about my actual stance on certain things, then I see them slowly like shifting away in some way. And they do it more so if it's not in person. Like I've never had a bad interaction with someone who was like SJW at my school or something, or I don't think I've ever had a bad instance of that. But through programs I work with or through different STEM opportunities I've gotten, I've seen it. And I mean, just recently there was a professor in, I think, North Carolina. He said some things that were disagreeable to many people, but he was pressured into retiring. Like, they gave him a retirement benefit and all this other stuff. And they were talking about how they didn't want to see him. A very influential science communicator, she made this like email to everyone because like here's another thing that a lot of people don't know. Scientists, they have like these little email groups, social media groups, Slack groups, all this other stuff. And then they talk within one another, and then that's how they network, and or not only for like social justice stuff, but for research purposes too, because it's a lot easier nowadays to collaborate with people and to, offer jobs and stuff. Because, if your program is looking for someone, you just throw out a little thing in your message group, and more than likely someone's going to read it and someone could be helped by that. So there's a lot of benefit to it, but there's a lot of ideological things in there. And I see a lot of, anti right wing or anti anything right of moderate left, and in these messages. And so basically, going back to that story, she sent all these emails out, had people email the university, and then right after emailing the university, they basically got him to retire, blocked him from opportunities, slandered him on many articles and all this other stuff, and he ended up taking his own life. And
I read about that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, like, when things like that happen, and I honestly, I don't think I would ever take my life over something
Mhm.
like that, but at the same time, when that's a possibility, and they kind of just shrug their shoulders like, well, he said something bad, over the internet. Like, I really don't care what he said over the internet. My thing is, when it comes to people doing their jobs, what I care about is if you do your job good or not. When we go to a restaurant, we don't say, what are the chef's political views? I really want to know the political views of the chef before I sit down at this restaurant and have a nice meal, or hey, like the person taking my order in the drive-through, like, what are their political, we don't say that because we don't care. We know what we care about is whether they do their service good or not, whether they service us good or not. And for some reason, when it comes to academia, they have this warped view of thinking that just because someone has, like, disagreeable views over the internet, that translates to them being bad at their job as a professor, a teacher, a student, that's a researcher or whatever. And when people have such a horrible view like that, it leads to people doing things that have so many unintended consequences, like taking their life, and their family being out, and left with all these bad memories of whatever they had to go through while they were here. It leads to people dropping out of uh, college, or dropping out of grad school and all this, because I know of people like that. I know of people who got their degree, they were just about to get into a research program, and then they made an article about something that someone didn't like, and then due to being canceled, they were thrown in this thing of depression due to all these, like, hateful messages they got, and then they went into industry, or just did nothing that their whatever their degree was about, um, permitted them to do. So there's a lot of consequences to cancel culture that I don't think most people in academia sees, and I don't think that they look at people like me as talent, but just like, you know um, more so of a puppet of right-wing talking points, and that's it. And that's the unfortunate, but I think most um, honest
Yeah.
interpretation that I could come up with.
Uh, Now, like, I don't know if you're back in person classes or if it's all online, but was there any like added? Oh, you got to take a diversity course this semester because I mean you're starting back. You had the whole summer of protests and riots and whatever. Was that added onto your, or did you already have to take a diversity course while you were in school?
I'm pretty sure I already took one, like, early
Yeah,
on. There was, I mean, of course they have sexual assault one. They have the
yeah,
drugs and alcohol test that you have to take
mm,
before you can pick classes and do all that. But then they also have, like, diversity one. And these are, like, very basic things, like, and it's crazy to me. But luckily now I don't have to have any of those classes because I've already taken the
all right. That's
optional classes
yeah.
and stuff. But
The reason I was bringing it up is because you were talking about, okay, that one professor. Then there was that. I think it was UCLA. The
mhm.
guy was talking about the Chinese word "nega." Someone thought it sounded like something else and got offended because, and I don't even know if the person who complained initially was black. And they said, well, if a black person had heard this, it might have sounded like this, and they might have faced some harm. Now, that idea of harm, and same thing with that professor at UNC. I think like he was, he would his what he said might cause this community X harm. That idea of causing harm. So I was just wondering if that was in your diversity training. Like, it's a thing from Herbert Marcuse called repressive tolerance. And I mean, you can read the paper. It's, if you want, I'll send it to you. But it's basically, it comes down to is, not only do you have to give people who are marginalized a voice, you have to censor anything that might cause them harm. So anything that they hear that it can offend them will cause them some form of harm. So you have to repress it. You have to repress that. So firing that professor because he said something that's harmful to people, that's why you have to fire him, because you're repressing the harm that his words might cause that community. So I don't know if you've come across that, or if you've come across anything like that in the guidelines, or if you hear that, like, something just specifically pushing harm towards words. Like, I'm trying to figure out how extensive that is.
Yeah, I asked myself that same question because I was hearing often when I first gone back to college about generational trauma and all this other stuff, and I was just like so confused about it, you know. And then when I read more into it, I was like, well, maybe I'm an exception to the rule, maybe. Like, I don't know. Like, but I don't have any generational trauma. I don't feel traumatized. And here's the thing that my ultimate view, like, even if that professor did say the N word or any other word that, you know, is very offensive, I still don't see that as a reason to either try to cancel him or fire him or even cause an outrage about, you know, like, I think what should be talked about more is how parents are teaching their children to be offended by very small things. And this habit of being offended by very small things, it goes to them being adults and being hypersensitive of things. um, I was having a conversation with a colleague the other day about representation, because I'm not one that thinks that representation is a hugely important thing. I do know that it can help. I do know that you know, there's data showing that it helps in many regards, but I don't think that it's necessary in order to, one, make the field better, and then two, for other people of a certain race, or for the population of a certain race to change. You know, like, there are many fields where previously there were no women in there, and then all of a sudden, like, within 10 years, all these women started coming in there, and then it was like half and half, and then now women are dominating. You know, I think sociology or psychology is one of those fields. Like, it's mostly women now, whereas it used to be mostly men. So, um, you know, what I was basically telling my colleague, I was like, why is it that parents are teaching children that they should be that they should look for representation in things? Like, why aren't we asking that question? You know, it's just like if we were to ask the question of or if we were to go into a room and say, you know, no one's wearing my shirt, so because of that I have imposter syndrome, and because of that I know that I can't do the things everyone else with different shirts have on in this room, people would look at that person and say, well, you failed as a parent, because, like, why would you put that in the child's head? But for some strange reason, it's cool to tell children that they should look for representation of race in order for them to achieve something. You know, if that were true, then, you know, Jackie Robinson would have never made it. Obama would have never made it. You know, many of these other people of different that jumped into these fields where they weren't represented, and yet they achieved better than most, they would have never made it. So I think the question needs to be shifted towards, why are there a lot of academics and parents prioritizing representation over having self-confidence?
Like, I've spoken with a couple of people about this. One of them, Lenore Skenazy, she does a thing called Free Range Kids, and it's to help get kids more self-confidence. And they do stuff for primary and middle schools. So it's little projects, right? You know, so if you're in kindergarten, first grade, kids will make toast in the morning for breakfast on the weekends, right? It's just a little to give them more confidence, and as the age appropriate, they get better. But parents are also given, like, you know, in some places you let your 9 or 10-year-old walk across the street to the park, someone will call Child Protective Services on you. But, you know, I was a latchkey kid. I was coming home at 7 by myself on the, on the bus. Like, okay, my parents were broke, couldn't afford daycare. Yes, maybe I shouldn't be coming home at 7, but, you know, whatever. I'm alive. There's got to be a happy medium there. But parents are also being fed a lot of this stuff. You see it in the media. You know, the representation thing that bugs me the most was the Apu thing in The Simpsons. Oh, blah blah
Mm,
blah. It's a bad representation because he owns a store. You know, like, okay, Apu was one of the more responsible characters on that show. He was hardworking. He raised it. He took care of his family. He worked. Yes, they made him out to be a buffoon, but everyone is a buffoon on that show.
Yeah, everyone is a
Okay.
buffoon. Yeah.
Well, when that happened, I was joking around. I'm like, wait a minute. My family moved to Canada from India. Within 6 months, my dad opened up or bought a convenience store, started running a convenience store. I'm like, my dad was fucking Apu. Where's my representation? Just because he wasn't a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, right? He was a guy who ran a convenience store. But like I said, he took care of his family. He was hardworking. He was responsible. He was, he was intelligent because he had the whole backstory. He's got his PhD and all that. But yet they don't care about having that guy on The Big Bang Theory who's got a really thick Indian accent. Like, okay, why not have someone who, like me, like I was born in India, I grew up here, I've got no accent. Why not have that story? Then, like, I don't care. Like, I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for a good story, good characters. I could read Shakespeare. When I was in high school, we read Shakespeare. A teenage boy can relate with Hamlet. Telling Ophelia to take thee to a nunnery because he thought she was fooling around. Like, I mean, it's there, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't a Danish prince, but I could relate to Hamlet. Like, I don't get that. Like, same
Yeah.
as you. I don't get that representation thing.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there's this unspoken assumption that, kind of like what you were talking about with the whole trauma thing, that all Black people have the same perspective on things. And this the Chelsea Handler thing, it's the Joe Biden thing with if you don't vote for me, you ain't Black thing. It's that whole line of thinking. It's like, why do you think that all people of any race or any gender think the same? I mean, of course there are going to be similarities, or you might find patterns here and there, but a lot of that is cultural, because Black people who are from Haiti or from some place in Africa or something are different from Black Americans, and that goes for any race, and the assumption that your perspective is intrinsic, is forever tied to your race. To me, that it just doesn't make any sense to me, and academics push this out and push this on parents so much, and I think that contributes to a lot of the discord that we see on
I
this
mean,
topic.
again, that, like, you have to, your race is like this. Like, you have, this is very, very small, but it's really pernicious. Like, I spent a lot of time reading some of this crap, and
Me too.
there is the slaves that were brought over to the United States helped in the genocide of the Native Americans because their slave labor helped the colonists. I have some understanding with, like, the ADOS thinking, like, okay, we're descendants of slaves. Someone who moved here from Nigeria 20 years ago, if there's reparations, they don't get reparations. I can understand some of that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's a really screwed up thing, but this thing of the slaves that were brought over because they were brought over as slaves and they worked for the colonialist and their labor helped the colonialist, they're responsible for the genocide. And again, like I said, it's a very, very small. It's not like a out there,
Yeah.
but that's where this thinking leads you. That's where this divide by race, who oppressed me, who didn't. I mean, I've also heard that someone like me, like my family, came over as immigrants, but we're participating in the colonizing effect because we're taking jobs away from indigenous and other peoples of color. I think Canada's got a higher white population than the United States, but the United States is somewhere between 65 and 75%, depending on how they look at what it's considered. Do you really want to make a country that is that majority white have all the other groups fight amongst themselves? If you're worried about white supremacy, wouldn't you want to get all the other groups to at least go, okay, kill Whitey, like, instead of, like, fight amongst yourselves? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But instead, they have this hierarchy of like race where, well, depending on your race, your sexuality, your gender, and then, they trickle down, and then white people are at the bottom to them. So it's just a strange thing, especially when I was having this like argument with someone, and they were talking about, because I mentioned that Nigerians are doing really good in the United States, And they said, well, Nigerians didn't have to go through slavery like you know, people from the transatlantic slave. And I was like, well, actually, it started in Nigeria largely, the slave trade that led to America. That's one. And two, it went a lot longer than it did in America. Previous before the transatlantic slave trade, and then after, I think they outlawed it in only North Africa in the 1930s, I believe, something like that.
Saudi Arabia was
So
in
if
68.
anything,
Sorry, Saudi Arabia was
oh
like
really?
64 or 68. Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, see, and like,
Yeah.
so when a Nigerian comes here, they should have all this generational trauma too. They should have um all of this like all of this insecurity about, you know, being not too far removed from slavery, but they don't. And they're doing better than a lot of groups. And you know, instead of studying why groups are successful, they obsess about why groups are not successful. And in Thomas Sowell's writing, he talks about that a lot. You know, instead of looking at why people are successful, they're looking at the opposite, and that's the reason why they're coming to the conclusions that they're coming to, instead of trying to help people out of their poverty or out of their quote unquote oppression.
Like I worked up north, so I was working in a remote Inuit community, and what was done to First Nations and Inuit in Canada, and I'm sure it's similar stories in the States, but it was just like there was the region I was living in. They moved some of the people even further up north because Canada needed to have a flag there to because they wanted to have the radar line and like, okay, we have to claim this land before the Russians do or whatever, things like that. This was during the Cold War. So whole communities were wiped out, and because they didn't know how to live in those areas, and there was starvation and things like that. So there's genuine, really bad stuff that happened, and I'm not trying to whitewash it. I'm not trying to like cover it up, but living up there, I'm seeing the way people are being treated. Like if an Inuit person goes to get their prescriptions, like if I go to get my prescriptions from the drugstore up there, I get my bottle of pills and it says take one pill twice a day. An Inuit person goes up, they give them, like I see it for seniors a lot, but it's like 7 days, and it's AM, morning, afternoon, evening, and they've got each dose and each little thing, and it's like one per week. Give them out like that. Okay, you got to take this. So you start today and you take this one, then you start. They treat them like little children, and I mean that's the way I feel with a lot of this coddling and, oh, poor you, you're brown, you need this extra help, you need this leg up. And I understand. Okay, someone comes over as an immigrant or a refugee or whatever. My parents arrived here as immigrants. They took advantage of French classes and this and that. Yeah, people need that. I have no problem with that. You need to learn the language. You need to learn the rules. You need to learn how to function. Like if you come from India to Canada, it's a culture shock. Less so than from like England, let's just say. But so that's got to be made available. But to continuously coddle someone and to continuously treat them like children, you're going to get people reliant on you. You're not going to get people who want to grow up. I saw it in Haiti. I worked in Haiti, and a lot of people were just tell us what to do. Haiti was a country longer than Canada, but it's only had 6 leaders. The rest were all 6 presidents. The rest were all dictators. So the attitude was call this, like I worked in IT and we hired local people to do some of the IT work. So when they were coming to do some of their work, they would come over, and the techs didn't even have the passwords to log into stuff. They would have to call back to their boss. Their boss would tell them the password and tell them line by line what to type in, because that was the mentality there. And I'm like seeing the same thing happening. I saw it up north where you give everyone the answers and you make it as easy as possible for them. Like, I don't know if you see that, like, I don't want to say the black community or whatever, but, neighborhoods you've grown up in, I don't know if you've seen things like that, or even on the colleges, like just coddling little kids or treating college students like little kids where they.
Yeah, I've seen that my whole life actually. It's kind of crazy. I mean, luckily I had the parents that taught me young to be self-reliant and to work hard and to take ownership for the things I can control and to disregard the things I can't control. My dad was a military man. I mean, I guess he was in the Marines, but Marines, they say like once in the Marines, always in the Marines. So me saying that he was once a military man, he would probably be offended by that. But he would always tell me, take ownership, take ownership over the things that you can do. There are going to be people who do negative things to you. What you can control is what you can control. Handle that however you may handle it. But, once it's over, it's over. Like, it's in the past. Like, get over it. And my mom was more so the educator, taught me to read at 4, like, taught me to be around books all the time. Whenever I got in trouble, I would have to read something and then interpret what I read to them, and, do little writing things and things of that nature. So that's the background I came from, luckily. But my peers, there are all these different programs and all these different things that were telling them, you failing is not your fault. It's the fault of the system, and the system, and you have to work 10 times as hard as any other person, especially if they're white, because the system is so much against you, and all this other crazy stuff that people are taught. And then in STEM, I see this in college, because they'll have all these programs for Black students and Black people, and now they're even hiring based on if you're Black or if you're a woman and things of that nature. That sometimes they'll mask it and they'll say like, oh, we're looking for people of underrepresented groups. But sometimes they're just like, no, we're looking for Black applicants, period. Or we're looking for Black and Native applicants, preferably women. And they'll put that in there.
Sorry, I'll just interrupt for a second.
Oh, no, it's cool.
Our national broadcaster in Canada, so it's paid for by tax dollars. A couple of times they put out ads and they said only non-white applicants, coming out of my tax dollars.
Yeah. And people don't understand that. Like, people are like, well, what's the harm? It's more representation. Is that? But it's the fact that you're pulling from someone else's wallet in order to support a program that they may not support and might be against their personal interests, and I don't understand why people aren't able to see that. And then again, it's just, I just hate the fact that coddling today is looked at as a virtue instead of what it is, which is like a backhanded compliment to everything that you're doing, and I've turned down so many opportunities based on the fact that they wanted me because I'm a Black physicist and all this other stuff. And I've also been excommunicated from certain STEM circles that are mainly like, they form groups based on being Black and STEM, be it Black physicists or, Black STEM people. And they get them opportunities on different podcasts or work opportunities or research based on that. And I've turned out so many because I don't want to ever get opportunities because I'm Black. I want to get it because I'm a good physicist, because I'm a good mathematician, because of my merit. You know what I mean?
That's the same with me. Like, I don't want a job because I'm brown. I don't want a promotion because I'm brown. If I don't deserve it, don't give it to me. And it just, if you got two people who are like me and a white guy who's are both equally qualified, and you pick me because I'm brown, fine. I guess in that case I'll take it. But it's but I don't even want to have to think about that. Like, it shouldn't be in the back of someone's head. Like you said, it's just the coddling and making you feel like if you didn't get this, if I didn't help you out, you're not going to get it. Like, I said this a while ago, and I would prefer David Duke to be an outright racist towards me than something of this coddling, which is like, I'll bring the Islam thing into it. Like, a right-wing racist might say, why are we going to go there? Those people are screwed up. Or no, look at those people. They can't even fix their own shit. We got to go fix their shit for them because they're so, camel jockeys are so backwards they can't fix it. One of these woke people, it's like, no, we have to go fix your stuff for you. It's like, because it's all screwed up, we'll have to come here and show you how to fix it. But not only that, we're the cause of all your problems. Like, we caused all your shit. Like, at least the right-wing bigot is giving me the agency of having caused my problems and not being able to fix them. But these guys are just saying I'm too stupid to have even caused my problems. Like,
yeah, and then and to any other person, like, why would you go to them if they caused your problem? Or why should I take your help if you're admitting to causing the problem that is. You know what I mean? It's just so strange. And then like to go on like the hiring experiment thing like that I often hear
Mhm.
in STEM circles. Like if we were to take like 50, let's say non-white applicants and then 50 white applicants with the same experience, same education level, like everything, and we were to randomly pick like 13 people to hire for a certain position, you would naturally have a disparity in one way or the other. And then also, you don't even know how they're picking out these applications. Like, are these applications coming like where the white applicants are first, or the black or the non-white applicants are second, or is it the other way around? Like, but what's often said is that with these with similar merit or the same merit, the white applicants are being picked more because that they're white, and nothing else is thought of, and therefore coddling is needed in order to get people
Mhm.
into these fields. And I just think that that's just a horrible way to think about things. Like, we need more people in fields that are great at what they do, and that truly want to do it at that. We don't need people in fields because of their skin color or because of their gender or sexuality, which is also another weird thing that's being considered now. Like, we need more LGBTQ people because we lack representation in that, and that's the reason why they're not in these fields like STEM. And it's just like, no, like, that's not the reason,
Yeah. But yeah, no, look, that's like I said, the whole representation thing. Look, I don't want to take too much of your time. People are busy. If you got any last words, you want to let people know where you can get a hold of you. It's been great talking to you. Go ahead.
um basically, I just want people to know that science is a process, and it's a process of getting the closest approximation as possible. It's not perfect. Just like the scientists that are doing it, we need to argue more about the policies around the science more than the science itself. If we're going to argue science itself, we need to argue it based on the science and not based on the politics. And then two, I just hope people could step away from this knowing that there are a lot of people in and outside of academia who may or may not be black, brown, or whatever, and they have different ideas, but because of their restrictions due to their jobs, they're prevented from saying anything, and that itself is a problem. And in order to improve, I would say, the atmosphere where we're able to talk about policy and all the other stuff, we need to be more honest with one another in terms of how we communicate and how critically we think about things. And but you can find me at anywhere of Instagram or Twitter, Eric's Electrons, and I'm trying to get on more platforms possibly, and then I'm also writing a book right now based on like my journey through identity politics getting to now, and why I think it's harmful to um, everyone that identity politics claims to want to help. So I don't have a date for when I would be finished with that yet, but I definitely am working on a book on that. And yeah, thank you for allowing me to come on this, because this was a good conversation.
Cool. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks for coming on. Thanks everyone for listening.